On March 3, 2026, in the Connecticut State Capitol, lawmakers debated an idea first seriously proposed in 1938, a fixed crossing between Connecticut and Long Island. At the site now under discussion, roughly 14 miles of water separate the shores, about 15 minutes on the crossing itself, if a road existed. 88 years of plans and studies have failed to build one. The hardest barriers are invisible and have outlasted every generation that studied the idea. So what is actually keeping this crossing unbuilt? Start with what the gap costs. Nassau and Suffolk counties hold about 2.9 million people, more people than 15 American states. Every road to the mainland leads west, through New York City. No bridge, tunnel, or rail line crosses the Sound. On October 29, 2012, Hurricane Sandy killed more than 40 people in New York City and showed how vulnerable the region is when roads, tunnels, and transit fail at once. Supporters say a crossing would give the island another way out in an emergency. The map has not changed. Pull up that map. Long Island stretches 118 miles into the Atlantic, pointing straight at New England, yet all of its road links exit at the far western tip into New York City. From the waterfront of Bridgeport, Connecticut looks south. The proposed span would run about 14 miles to the Long Island shore near Kings Park. Today, the only direct link is a ferry to Port Jefferson, roughly 75 minutes each way. By road, the same journey is a long loop west through the city, across choke points like the Throg's Neck and the Bronx Whitestone. Geography offers a shortcut. Politics has never opened it. Nearly every decade since 1938 has produced a new proposal. The most powerful came from Robert Moses, the man behind many of New York's great bridges, who championed a span from Oyster Bay to Rye. Shoreline residents on both sides fought it for years. The traffic, the towers, the change. And in 1973, the plan finally died. One detail about that defeat matters more than any other for the rest of this story. Even as Moses lost this fight, he pushed another giant crossing into existence elsewhere in New York, against opposition every bit as fierce. The difference between those two battles explains what happened since. Hold on to it, because the idea refused to stay dead. In 2008, a developer pitched a private tunnel from Oyster Bay to Rye. It went nowhere. In January 2016, Governor Andrew Cuomo committed $5 million for an answer. In December 2017, the engineering firm WSP delivered its verdict in 82 pages. A crossing can be built, bridges over the shallow shelves, tunnels beneath the shipping channels, or a combination, with price tags from $8.5 billion for the shortest bridge to $55.4 billion for the deepest tunnel. For the western route, the study projected that a trip between Syosset and the Rye-Port-Chester area could fall from as much as 100 minutes to roughly 15 or 20. Depending on the alignment, projected toll revenue reached as much as $699 million a year. Then, in 2018, the state's transportation commissioner announced New York would not move forward. No detailed public justification followed. Which obstacle would you bet on? The cost, the environment, or the politics? The state's own study hints at a quieter answer. Before opening it, look at how such a crossing actually gets built, because it has been built 400 miles south. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel crosses 17.6 miles at the mouth of the bay in the open reach of the Atlantic. Crews drove concrete piles into the seabed and laid miles of low trestle bridge across the shallows. Where shipping channels had to stay open, crews dredged deep trenches, cast enormous tunnel sections on land, floated them out, and sank them into place. An immersed tube, assembled like sections of pipe. 4 artificial islands stitched the bridges to the tunnels. The structure took 42 months and opened on April 15, 1964. Its financing was the boldest part. $200 million in revenue bonds, over $2 billion in today's dollars, sold to private investors, repaid by tolls without a single tax dollar. More than 60 years later, the crossing still runs on tolls, and Virginia is building a new parallel tunnel beside one of the originals, under a design-build contract worth roughly $756 million. Nothing about this engineering is experimental. It is older than the moon landing. There is, however, a number in New York's own study that almost nobody quotes. For most of the routes WSP examined, projected toll revenue would cover only part of the annual cost of the construction debt. One shorter bridge option came out far stronger. The Great Tunnel and hybrid plans would need massive public support. Critics add a second concern. The MTA's 9 bridges and tunnels collected roughly $2.6 billion in tolls in 2024, and much of it supports the city's transit system. A new crossing could divert some of those toll-paying drivers. There is no public evidence that protecting toll revenue drove New York's decision, but the financing gap alone was real enough. Whether that logic holds depends on who wins the argument over the water. Communities around the Sound have fought many previous crossing plans, over traffic, development, and the fear of quiet towns becoming highway approaches. Environmental groups warn that pile driving, dredging, and years of construction could damage an ecosystem that took decades of cleanup to recover. On the other side stand Bridgeport, commuters trapped on Interstate 95, and supporters who see it as an economic opening and an emergency exit. In September 2025, developer Steven Shapiro put the crossing back on the table. His argument begins on land. I-95 between Stamford and Bridgeport was designed in the 1950s for roughly 70,000 cars a day and now carries more than twice that. His original proposal, a 14-mile crossing from Bridgeport to Suffolk County, roughly $50 billion, financed in his plan through state money, a federal loan, and private capital. But his most important idea is not the bridge. It is the machine that could finance, approve, and operate it. And this is the difference promised earlier. The Chesapeake crossing was delivered by an independent district created for one purpose. The Verrazzano Narrows was driven through by Moses's Triborough Authority, with the power to issue bonds and condemn land. Power that displaced roughly 7,000 people in Brooklyn before the span opened on November 21, 1964. But that machine could not repeat its victory on the Sound. By the early 1970s, the Triborough Authority had been absorbed into the MTA. Moses had lost his chairmanship, environmental protections had grown stronger, and shoreline communities had gained real legal and political power. No institution could secure the money, the permits, and the public support at once. An authority may be necessary for a project this size. History says it is not sufficient. That is exactly what Connecticut weighed in 2026. House Bill 5320 would have directed the state to study creating a Connecticut Bridge Authority, with findings due by January 1, 2027. Lawmakers heard the arguments in March. Then the bill died in committee before the session ended. The idea outlived the paperwork. Shapiro kept campaigning and later presented a revised bridge and tunnel concept modeled on the Chesapeake crossing. And roads are no longer the only blueprint. A coalition called North Atlantic Rail has proposed high-speed trains from Penn Station through Long Island into a 16-mile tunnel beneath the Sound. Part of a $105 billion network, its backers say, could cut New York-Boston travel to roughly 100 minutes. Yet every version of the future, on rails or on wheels, faces the same unresolved problem. No institution has yet secured the money, backing, and consent to carry it through. The geography is permanent. The open question is who, if anyone, can ever gain the power and the legitimacy to decide. So the real question was never 14 miles wide. Should two states build an authority powerful enough to push a crossing through? Or is the resistance of shoreline communities exactly what protects people from the next Robert Moses? Engineers proved decades ago that it can be built. They could never prove it would be affordable, accepted, or worth its consequences. That argument was never theirs to settle.